Welcome to another episode of the Federal Newswire's Business of America podcast with your host, Jerry Rogers.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Business of America. We're staying on our theme of innovation, science, the business of innovation, the business of science, the business of health, pharmaceuticals, and vaccines. You know, vaccines has become even more controversial since COVID. And what bothers me as someone who's engaged in health policy, in policy broadly, is that vaccines are such an important part of public health, but also in terms of companies and scientists and entrepreneurs and creating new innovations to protect us from the diseases or the pandemics that we don't even know about yet. So I'm very excited. So a very good friend of mine who I've known, Bob, I've known you for over 20 years, I think.
We started out in nursery school together.
So Dr. Robert Goldberg, Bob Goldberg, is a founder and vice president of the Center for Medicine in the Public Interest. Now, I know Bob going back to our days at the Manhattan Institute, where he headed up that organization's FDA project. This is a man who knows more. He's forgotten more about innovation and health policy than I know right now. So, but Bob, it's such a, and I have to say this, and to our viewers who might be offended, Bob and I, of course, are Yankee fans.
That's right.
Because we love winners.
Yes.
And so therefore, Yankees and innovation go together. But Bob, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about the Center for Medicine in the Public Interest, CMPI. I know Peter Pitts, former assistant secretary or associate secretary at FDA, is your partner there. Just tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I started out writing about healthcare and doing healthcare policy during the initial foray into national health insurance through President Bill Clinton, and and where price controls were there were two things that took place. One was the National Health Security Act, which discussed imposing price controls on new medicines, including breakthrough technologies, but also as a forerunner to the National Health Security Act, Hillary Clinton proposed a Vaccines for Children's program with the idea of having the government be the sole purchaser of all vaccines for children and using the purchasing power of the government to award single source contracts for every vaccine. And we'll get into that a little bit later because it's a cautionary tale for vaccine innovation. But since that time, just to fast forward, I've been doing healthcare policy for longer than there's been health. And
you go back to the days when they just got mud and they put water on it and they put the mud on the wound. That was your innovation.
I've got some leeches in the refrigerator for my migraines. So I've been involved in every iteration of FDA reform. Was involved when I was at the Manhattan Institute in reforming the Medicare to include Medicare Advantage. Through the Center for Medicine in the Public Interest, our remit has been to really sort of explain, why the business of medical innovation is the most powerful engine for human progress, but also economic growth in the years ahead. And unfortunately or fortunately, there are issues that come up along the way where people want to mess with the system, and we try to explain why it's not a good idea to do that.
I know that you have a piece currently at the American Mind on is or can healthcare futures be the future of healthcare?
Yeah,
where you look at a business kind of approach to Medicare and to price controls and to innovation.
Well, just to sum up the article is that there's a futures market for corn, powdered milk, cocoa powder, energy, carbon credits. And what that means is that you have an ability to take something that you have to purchase, and the cost is going to fluctuate, and turn it into a financial asset which you can trade to minimize risk. We don't have that in healthcare, even though it's 1/3 of our economy. So the paper basically says, how would you turn the healthcare cost into tradable assets like options or swaps and derivatives, so that if there's something like COVID comes up, COVID was a great example where it was unexpected, and a lot of hospitals lost revenue because the revenue. How do you hedge against stuff like that? How do you hedge
Sure.
against the fact that new vaccines come to the market every day and there's downstream benefits? So that's my current. Peter and I are doing the pet project. I think we can help find a way to evade and avoid price controls by allowing people to hedge risk and place bets on future innovation in a market-based setting.
Unfortunately, I think look, we have a healthcare system, but really we have healthcare systems, right? We have Medicaid, Medicare. We have the veterans health system. The states have different healthcare systems, but we also do have a private system, and the private system, private healthcare does take its lead sometimes from what's happening in the public healthcare system.
Sure.
And so on that issue. We're in October, and I know those who follow health policy. We're familiar with the CDC, Centers for Disease and Prevention. Centers for
Disease Control and Prevention.
Prevention. Thank you very much. Yeah. Oh my goodness! Yesterday I called my sister to
CDC,
wish her.
You called the CDC?
I called my sister to wish her a happy anniversary.
Yeah.
Except her anniversary is August 10th. Not October 10th. Okay. So sometimes my mind is going somewhere else. But the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, deals with vaccine policy and vaccine recommendations. And the agenda, which is public, you can go to the ACIP webpage. The agenda for October 23rd, 24th is to look at pneumonia vaccines.
Right.
And a couple of things. I think good news, very good news from a public health standpoint. And I also think good news from a business standpoint. And that is, they are going to consider lowering the recommended age for a pneumonia vaccine from age 65 to 50, which makes sense in terms of health, makes sense in terms of innovation, getting these vaccines into patients who need them. However, looking at the language of and again, I could be reading into this, Bob, but I'll get your expertise. Looking at the language of the meeting agenda, it looks like they're saying vaccine, not vaccines. And why that's important, and I'll let Bob explain this, because there are 2 FDA-approved vaccines for pneumonia. And both are good medicines. And my concern is that ACIP will recommend one over the other. And I think that would be devastating to public health, devastating to innovation, could be devastating to the supply chain. It could be bad policy also, because like we started the program, already there is this skepticism about the government, public health, and vaccines. And if ACIP chooses a loser and a winner and loser, then it's going to feed into this narrative that it's all about picking winners and losers, government making choices that should be made in the exam room. So that's my overview. But Bob, I know that you're writing a white paper on this. You've published at least one op-ed on it. I'm sure more to come. But why don't you give us an overview here of ACIP, what they might do, and why what they might do could be good or bad?
So take a step back. Why is ACIP having anything to do? What does ACIP have to do with the business of vaccines or innovation? Well, under the Affordable Care Act, once ACIP makes a recommendation of coverage, The CDC reviews it, and if it agrees with the ACIP recommendation, which it normally does, then those immunizations, those shots have to be covered by Medicare, by Medicaid, by the VA, by the Public Health Service, and generally, any plan that Affordable Care, basically all plans have to cover it. So if ACIP were to choose one vaccine over another, which I would be very surprised, frankly, and I'll go into that, it would be fairly unprecedented, and it would be fairly damaging to the economics of vaccine development, because and this is, by the way, vaccines are a good business, but they're not GLP-1s. They're not the weight loss drugs. They're not they're not the.
Why are you looking at me and saying weight loss drugs? Come on now.
I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at myself.
But I get your point. There's profit here, but this isn't the big blockbuster medicines, right?
Yeah, and as I mentioned in the white paper, in 2002, there was a shortage of pneumococcal vaccines for children, along with diphtheria and measles, because there were the government, in their infinite wisdom, imposed high legal costs on the industry, but also that they tried to sole source the contracts to drive down the price. And a lot of companies just closed up shop. We actually had to go out, and we actually had to get an FDA waiver to get vaccines from England to cover the shortfall. And, here we are, we've just came out of COVID, where we had 6 to 7 different companies making vaccines of different types, which is very important, by the way, as we can talk about later, that were all available and all paid for. And that spurred a huge amount of innovation. We're having a similar rebirth in pneumococcal vaccine research in recent years, in addition to a product that was introduced in 21 and now this year. There's other vaccines, and why you say, well, it's only one disease. No, pneumonia is not one disease. There are several strains, and these strains mutate. So you need to keep ahead of the of the pathogen. And as you remember when I was at the Manhattan Institute, I had the honor of working with Joshua Lederberg, a Nobel Prize winner, who actually developed he got the Nobel Prize for determining that there were different pneumonia strains. He said that we are in an existential struggle with pathogens, and to limit access to one vaccine would, I think, undermine total protection against the vaccine. It would discourage innovation, and then, to your point, people in the wake of the conflict and controversy over vaccine mandates, I think, would question the decisions of the government to award one vaccine or another, and begin to raise serious questions about the efficacy and safety of that one particular vaccine.
It's interesting because, I've had Eric Hargan, former Deputy Secretary of HHS, on the program, and other innovators, CEOs of biofirms, and we've had many experts and business leaders on the program to talk about medical innovation. And just a couple things I want you to comment on. Number one, what we did during COVID, and what the companies did, the U.S. biopharma sector really did something miraculous. And so insofar as they brought vaccines to market in 10, 11 months, unheard of. Now, I know the Operation Warp Speed, there was government cooperation, and a lot of the roadblocks were taken down. But because of the skepticism and the mandates and when the politicians took over, the COVID response went sideways, and we ought to be celebrating vaccines today, because of the great success of Operation Warp Speed, but instead there is a growing segment of the public that do not trust vaccines or vaccine science. So again, someone who's interested in this area, who works in it, who has 5 children, and I want a healthy, wealthier future for them, we have to get the public to trust public health again.
Yeah.
And I do think ACIP can play a huge role here. And again, not picking winners and losers, following the science and nothing else. I think makes really good. It makes good policy and health sense, but almost, I hate to use this word, it's good political sense. But what do you think?
Yeah, well, I've spoken off the record with former ACIP members, and they said exactly what you said. First of all, it would be unprecedented to choose one vaccine over the other. In the case of the pneumococcal vaccine, there's something called sequential protection, which is, I'm, despite my youthful appearance, I'm 69 years old.
You're not. Wait, time out.
I am.
You are?
I know.
You look, first of all, hey, you look great. I don't care how you feel. It's better to look good than to feel good. But Bob, if you're 69, that makes me, I'm not telling.
Okay, don't say anything. But I got the first 2 types of pneumonia vaccines. Now, what's out there now will allow perhaps more protection, but to get that as a standalone, I think would be unprecedented on a number of levels. The other thing that, in talking to the former members, is that when they were struggling with the COVID vaccine, their concern was, in fact, trying to engender trust. And actually, I may just have to put this into the white paper, that they were very, very conscious of not playing favorites for one reason or another. In part because they wanted people, and in fact, the first wave of vaccines, the uptake was huge. It's only when politicians began to muck up the process and impose their certitude,
Yes, that's a good word for that.
Yeah.
If you're looking backwards, if the politicians were more honest with the American people, the American people could handle that. So we understand no medicine is 100%, foolproof. Medicines respond differently to different people. Vaccines respond differently. And so, during the COVID years, the politicians should have told us, yes, this will keep you safe, safer. It'll make your life better. If you have chronic conditions, if you're of a certain age, you must do this. But they went further than that. They sold us kind of a fairy tale magic. This is a magic thing. And because of that, we've lost faith in. We lost faith,
and they said trust us, and then they weren't totally honest. So, for instance, going back to pneumonia vaccines or COVID vaccines, there are different strains. People's bodies are different. Some people are immunocompromised. I mean, when the COVID vaccines rolled out, coverage decisions were made on an individual basis. And frankly, there were side effects from the RNA vaccines. I mean, they weren't serious. They were easily treatable. But we should have been honest with people about the effect. And then the other thing, of course, is with respect to the whole issue of trust, the story that was being told after the first wave of immunization was that the additional new vaccines offered more protection than natural immunity, which is scientifically 9 times out of 10 untrue. And there was a unwillingness on the part of the public policy community and politicians to acknowledge those kinds of things. I think, to ACIP's credit, in the past, they have really played it, straight down the middle.
Yeah, balls and strikes. It's playoff season, right? ACIP, its history again,
Yeah.
you know better than I, is they're honest brokers calling balls and strikes, looking at the science, looking at the evidence. And again, I don't want to relive COVID, but the fact of the matter is that I think, what happens on October 23rd at ACIP, this isn't like a huge health occurrence, but it's still something, it's a sliver that can help rebuild that trust lost.
Yes.
And also,
that's a very good way to put it. Yeah.
I like what you said. I don't think government should ever play favorites.
Yeah. Look, the part of the problem is that back in the day, I think under the Obama, the Affordable Care Act, they put a provision in that ACIP start looking at the cost effectiveness of vaccines.
I remember that debate.
As an economist, first of all, cost effectiveness, we only look at the short term, not the long term. But vaccines themselves, once you start making a decision, well, this drug or vaccine generates more life years saved at this cost versus that cost, it's a one-size-fits-all approach, which immunization policy is not. My concern is not so much with ACIP, but what happened with COVID and other health decisions is that the government officials, elected officials, it's a campaign, it's election season, they want to make a statement, we're going to stick it to those drug companies, and the call goes out that to CDC that you've got to play hardball with all the vaccine makers when it comes to pneumonia, and that would be a disaster. And again, not only just for the long term, we can talk about the long term innovation, but if that gets out, Jerry, exactly what you described is that this will become a political football, and people's confidence in using those vaccines will be undermined, and that'll be a terrible thing.
Well, and you just said it because I had a bout with pneumonia recently, and I'm my father's son. I'm a pretty strong guy. I have never been laid out.
Oh, it's terrible.
I didn't know what was wrong with me. It was a hard, and the thing is that I don't have chronic conditions. I don't have diabetes. I don't have COPD. I don't have these other conditions. So getting this vaccine innovation to the patients who need it, 50 years old and older, but also those who have chronic conditions and other health issues. Again, this is very good public health policy, and I learned this from you years ago. We take it for granted, but when we were working together years ago, you were one of the first think tankers to talk about how all medicine is personal, and so if all medicine is personal, then having two options is better than one option.
Yeah.
Right. And again, so ACIP ought to choose both options. So doctors and patients, we hear a lot, right? We're coming up on November. We're coming up on the election. We hear a lot about don't get in the way of the doctor and the patient, or
right.
And there shouldn't be a politician.
Exactly. Government shouldn't be involved. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. And here's an example of, and again, for our audience, CDC's in Atlanta. Experts in Atlanta should not be making the final decision for doctors in upstate New York or rural North Carolina or anywhere in the country. So if there are two options, both should be recommended, and let the doctors and the patients make their choices. But talk a little bit about that. Also, the long-term impact when you choose one over the other. What does that do to innovation and for new cures?
Well, just to again take another step back. Without
we're going in through the outdoor, Bob.
We're going at it would be bad science and bad medicine to recommend one over another as the starter under any circumstances, let alone the fact that with people have different protective levels for pneumonia. There's different strains, so we need an all of the above approach. That's good science, and it's built in terms of innovation. I'm going to just pull this up. there are 4 or 5 new vaccines in development alone for pneumonia. Nasal delivery types with all the different strains, 23 strains. There's ones that are tailored to people with heart conditions because in the wake of COVID, people who are greater at risk of going to the hospital are more likely to die because there's still a lingering hangover of cardiovascular issues, which are brought on by being admitted to the hospital and community-acquired pneumonia. So a single source decision would kill the investment in future pneumococcal vaccines and probably many other vaccines, because it would we'd go back to what happened with the vaccine for children's program when people said, "That's it, I'm out."
So for the layperson, why should we invest this research and development into vaccines broadly, or specifically into pneumonia vaccines, if the government's just going to pick winners and losers? What's the point? We could make money here. We could make money there. Another weight loss drug, another ED drug. And again, weight loss drugs and ED drugs we need those too. But the thing is that it's these life-threatening conditions where science can intervene to save lives. One thing we haven't said yet, I don't know if we did, I'll say it again. Pneumonia vaccines save lives, period. So why not have, if there are 2 available, if one saves lives, 2 will save lives.
Well, here, look, and the data shows that, when we had one pneumonia vaccine back in the 1970s, it made a dent in deaths. 1990s, we had 2 or 3. Then in 2010, we had another. I mean, the trend line of mortality from pneumonia is directly correlated to the number of new vaccines that are being introduced. It's a straight, it's a 1-for-1 relationship, Jerry. And we would cut. We would lose we're winning the battle against pneumonia. We would lose the battle if we took this kind of policy decision.
So we're winding down, but I do want to ask you this, and I've asked this to others who are involved in again, the business of healthcare, and that is, America is so blessed. The United States is blessed with a unique and successful biopharma sector, but we seem to want to make it into a pariah, or some politicians want to make it into a pariah. The big bad pharma, the drug companies, they make X amount of money, and the bottom line is that other nations, if they have an industry that is driving the economy and driving innovation, they promote those industries. In America, we seem to beat up on our own here. And, again, I'll give you a simple kind of a metaphor for this, because I know you and I love baseball. The Yankees playing the Royals, and there was a hard slide into second, a hard tag put on by Volpe, the Yankee shortstop. And, a brouhaha. The benches cleared and the bullpens came out. And Garrett Cole, who's the pitcher, was going right up to that guy who slid hard into his shortstop. And he was asked after the game, "What were you doing?" He says, "I don't know what was going on, but that's my shortstop, and I have his back." And you know what? I knew you and I were going to be talking today, and I thought to myself, well, you know what? America has such great entrepreneurs and business sectors like biopharma, but yet we don't have their back. We're always looking to go after them. Any comments or thoughts on that?
Yeah, you remember, when I was at Manhattan Institute and also at CMPI, did a lot of work with Frank Lichtenberg.
Sure,
of course. Yes,
I do.
Columbia.
Yes.
And Frank, when I first talked to him about doing some work with Manhattan Institute, he said, "Well, let me lay my cards on the table." And he said, "I'm a liberal Democrat." I said, "Okay." And I know that Manhattan's who's sort of like left of center says, but
Right of center, right of center,
right
of
of
center.
center says, but says, you know, people we want people to make billions in investing in healthcare. I mean, because what better investment is there? If you send the signal that you're only going to charge set the price at 50% of what it is, you're going to only get 50% of the effort. And as again, he said, as an American, and as an economist that was very data driven, it's my feeling that I need to show time and again that we should have the back of this industry. There is, Thomas Jefferson once said about vaccines that he wrote, I think he wrote the letter to Edwin Jenner, who did the smallpox inoculation. You have reduced the calendar of human afflictions in an unparalleled fashion. And no other country in the world does that better than the United States of America, than our innovators. For all the problems, and look, there's always outliers and the pharma bros. It happens in every industry. Like,
sure.
I got spooked. He started following me on Twitter. Like, what's going on, bro? But we should be bolstering our, and it's not just through NIH money and through, ARPA aids and stuff. Let the system work. Let the science drive the decisions, drive the investment, and drive the clinical activity that keeps us going. So I just I'm hoping, and I'm fairly confident that ACIP will not get some edict from above to select one vaccine over another. But I think it's really very valuable for us to talk about it, because we can't take it for, in addition to having the back of innovators, we can't take it for granted either.
Sure. Because Bob, it's funny. I talked to when I first started doing this kind of work, better than 20 years ago. I mean, after the Manhattan Institute, I came down to DC and worked in the pharma industry as on the policy side.
Yeah.
And I remember my first conversation with someone, and I was learning, and he said, "Look," he said, "this industry made most of its money at some point in the past with cosmetics and with those kind of products. And if we're regulated to death, or politics overcomes science, we could make money in all these other areas." And again, I want to just echo what you just said. And
absolutely, yeah.
ACIP can, again, it's amazing. Here we are 30 minutes talking about ACIP. It's a good conversation. I'm having a blast. But who would have thought this?
Yeah.
Right? Who would have thought ACIP is a compelling topic? Well, it is, because their decision, if they lower the age to 50, the new pneumonia vaccine recommended age from 65 down to 50, and if they recommend both FDA approved medicines, ACIP will do so much to bring us back to normal when it comes to vaccine science and trusting the public health community again. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah. So, first of all, lowering the age to 50, very, very important, because of what we learned about the risks of pneumonia, especially after COVID. But again, we're always on the edge of uncertainty with medicine. And that's why innovation is so risky. Ultimately, you don't know. We need to reward the innovators for, again, following the science and completing giving us a whole toolkit. It would be the height of folly to learn from the last couple of years, Inflation Reduction Act and so on, that you can play politics with the lives of Americans and have and not pay for it, both in terms of lost lives, but in terms of the fact that China would love to have these what we're doing now, and I can tell you for a fact they're standing offers. A company that moves to China, it's like re-signing soda. What do you want? Fill in the blank. But for,
Yes.
like a free agent, and we can't let that happen because we're the only country in the world that is, we export cures.
Yeah.
We're the only country that does that. We export cures. And we would lose that strategic advantage. We would lose the innovation. And the reason that we're talking about this little agency is because of the policy environment, the context that we've dealt with. So I hope we're just like last night. I hope I was worrying about nothing when they brought Clay Holmes in. But
I love it. Yes, I know, right? Hey, for our viewers who aren't baseball fans, Clay Holmes was the Yankee closer.
Yeah.
He had a great first half, blew 13 saves in the second half, but he's had a bit of a rebirth as a setup man in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I'm nervous too, because I want public health to recover. It needs to recover.
Yeah.
Americans have to understand the importance, the science, the health benefits, the life-saving benefits of vaccines. I think, Bob, you named the show. We're going to call this today, it's the business of America, of course, but today is going to be the business of exporting cures.
Yeah.
That's going to be our moniker for the show. But anyway, Bob Goldberg, my good friend, Yankee fan, CMPI, this has been a great pleasure. I think what we ought to do is, and I say this to a lot of my guests, but I mean it with you. No,
that's right. Everyone else,
no.
Yeah.
But
Sure,
I think we ought to have a series of conversations about innovation, about the future of medicine. Another term you coined that I use even today is 21st century medicine. Yeah. We don't want the medicine from last century. We want 21st century medicine. And for ACIP, again, bring back to ACIP's decision to lower the recommended age, and to recommend both federally FDA approved medicines is bringing vaccine policy, keeping it in the 21st century. Anyway, God bless you, buddy.
Thank you. Same to you.
This has been another episode of the Business of America with my good friend Bob Goldberg. We'll see you again next week. Thank you very much.
This has been the Federal Newswire's Business of America podcast, hosted by Jerry Rogers. Check out the Federal Newswire's family of websites, as well as their social media stream